In our next lesson, we're going to continue to look at how the Industrial Revolution transformed economic systems and social conditions around the world. The ancestral question for this lesson is going to be what new ideas about economics, science, and society were fostered as a result of the Industrial Revolution. The aim of the lesson is to identify individuals that proposed new theories which challenged existing beliefs. We're going to explain social Darwinism, socialism, and communism. Let's set the stage. The Industrial Revolution slowly changed the social order in the Western world by creating a more complex social structure due to industry. Scientists challenged long-held beliefs about the natural world. By the late 1800s, big business dominated industry. Scientists and philosophers put forth differing theories to make sense of the changing world. The first individual we're going to study is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin proposed the theory of evolution, which stated that in isolation plus time and adapting to local conditions would lead to new species. So this is just the evolution of species over time based on their surroundings. From the theory of evolution came social Darwinism, and it adapted to the Industrial Revolution and capitalism. And it said that successful business people were successful because they were naturally more fit to succeed than others. Social Darwinism also adapted to war, because war allowed stronger nations to weed out weaker ones. And social Darwinism played a part in racism, the belief that one race is superior to another. We could also use ethnocentrism with social Darwinism, the belief that your culture is superior to another. Adolf Hitler believed that the Nazis were a superior race, and he used social Darwinism to start World War II and the Holocaust. Social Darwinism also contributed to the rise of imperialism, when a stronger country takes advantage of a weaker country. The best way I could describe social Darwinism might just be from this very simple picture where the person on the left is a lot bigger and stronger, and he is saying that I am better than you. The next theory we're going to look at in this unit is socialism. The definition for socialism is an economic system in which goods and services are provided through a central system of cooperative and/or government ownership rather than through competition and a free market system. Remember, a free market system is what Adam Smith wrote about in The Wealth of Nations, so socialism would be the opposite of capitalism. The main focus for socialists is equality, as capitalism causes a large gap between the rich and the poor. Under socialism, the people as a whole, the society rather than private individuals, would own and operate the means of production, the farms, factories, railways, and other large businesses that produce and distributed goods. Workers receive what they need to produce and survive. There's no incentive to achieve more, leaving little for motivation. The next theory that came about during the Industrial Revolution would eventually be called communism. Communism was an idea that was thought about by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels directly saw the effects of the Industrial Revolution. The horrible conditions the working class were working in the factories, as well as the lives they were leading in the cities, which were incredibly unhealthy, as well as the working class was always very poor. So Karl Marx was a revolutionary activist and self-educated economist. He became interested in social change during the Industrial Revolution. Marx and Engels wrote a pamphlet, the Communist Manifesto. Communism is a form of socialism, which according to Marx is an inevitable struggle between social classes. The haves, the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie would be the factory owners, and the have-nots. The have-nots are the working class, or the proletariat. This would eventually lead to creation of a classless society where all the means of production would be owned by the community. Again, a classless society would erase the social hierarchy. You would not have a rich middle class and a poor. Everyone would be equal. Class struggle. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx theorized that economics was the driving force in history. He argued that there was a history of class struggles between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor. The haves have always owned the means of production, or they owned the factories, and thus controlled society and all its wealth, which was a fairly true statement. All of the owners that owned the factories, that is the means of production. They controlled society and all its wealth and all its money. And most people were the working class, and they were very not well off. They were very poor. And in the end, Marx predicted that the proletariat, or the working class, would win this struggle. And a very common statement from the Communist Manifesto that will show up often on our regents is "Workers of the world unite." All of the workers coming together, the have-nots will rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie. In practice, however, communism later came to refer to a system in which governments, led by a small elite, controlled all economic and political life. As we look into communism, you're going to find out that all of the profits in the end were not shared. In the second half of the year, we're going to study the Soviet Union, and that only a small elite of people in the government really still controlled all of the wealth in society or in a country. Karl Marx despised capitalism, which was the ability of factory owners to make a lot of money or a lot of profits, and believed it created prosperity for only a few and poverty for many, which is a very true statement. He called for an international struggle to bring about its downfall. Workers of all countries, he urged, should unite. The next chart will give us a better understanding of the haves and the have-nots. And it takes in a couple of different units throughout 9th and 10th grade to explain who the haves and who the have-nots are. So the haves would be people that were wealthy. The patricians in ancient Rome, right? The nobility. Or the nobles in feudalism. The first and second state before the French Revolution. And now under communism or under capitalism, you had the bourgeoisie. Right? They were the very wealthy factory owners. The have-nots would be the working class, the peasants, or the plebeians in ancient Rome, the serfs under feudalism, or the third estate before the French Revolution. And during the Industrial Revolution, they were called the proletariat. On this slide, we're going to look at 3 examples, and I want you to try to figure out if each example is either capitalism, communism, or socialism. Example 1. You have 2 cows. The government takes them and puts them in a barn with everyone else's cows. You have to take care of all of the cows. The government gives you as much milk as you need. Example 2. You have 2 cows. Your neighbor helps you take care of them, and you all share the milk. Example 3. You have 2 cows. You have to take care of them, but you can sell the milk for a profit. Please pause the video and try to figure out which example is capitalism, communism, or socialism. Example 1 is socialism. There is government ownership of the cows in this example, so this is going to be socialism. Number 2 is going to be communism, where the means of production are owned by the community. In this example, the cows are the means of production. Example 3 is capitalism, because you can sell the milk for a profit. Now let's take a look at this review question. Which of the given speakers best represents the views of Karl Marx? Speaker A. If the rate of population growth continues to exceed the growth in the food supply, there will not be enough food for all of the people. Speaker B. There are people who are wealthy and people who are poor. This is just how things are. Speaker C. History is the story of class struggle. Eventually the working class will rise up and revolt against the wealthy. Speaker D. The government should do what is best for most of its people. Please pause the video and think about what the correct answer is. The answer is Speaker C. History is a story of class struggle. The working class, the proletariat, will rise up and revolt against the wealthy bourgeoisie. Next question. Which of the following statements would social Darwinists most likely support? A. Stronger groups have the right to rule and control weaker groups. B. Universal suffrage is a basic human right. C. Political equality strengthens the effectiveness of government. D. Public education should be guaranteed to all members of society. Please pause the video and think about the correct answer. The answer is A. Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. Stronger groups have the right to rule and control weaker groups. Now let's answer our essential questions. What new ideas about economics, science, and society were fostered as a result of the Industrial Revolution? First is social Darwinism. Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest, led to ethnocentrism, racism, and war. Next is socialism, a political and economic theory that advocates for the people as a whole, rather than private individuals to own and operate the means of production. That would be farms, factories, and other large businesses. And last is communism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, which led to the birth of communism. Communism would lead to a class war between the rich, the bourgeoisie, and the poor, the proletariat, leading to a classless society where all the means of production, which are the factories and the businesses, would be owned by the community. This is the end of the lesson, but I'm going to put up 3 slides that I would like you to just spend some time to take a look at. Because of a lot of the negative effects of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of reforms were passed in Parliament. And they're called the British Reform Laws. There are too many laws to go into them in depth, but it's important to take a look about what laws were eventually passed to improve the rights of people living in cities or workers in factories. So there was a direction of reform. The first one would be greater human rights, slavery being outlawed in British colonies in the late 1880s. There's a reform for more representation in government. On the next slide, we have universal suffrage. Anytime you see the word suffrage, it is the right to vote. So over the course of 80 years in England, you're seeing men and women given the right to vote. On the bottom, we have rights for workers. Unions were legalized, and there were laws passed by Parliament limiting child labor, regulating the number of hours women and children were allowed to work, safety conditions in factories and mines, setting minimum wages, which was the smallest amount that you could be paid to make sure you were paid not below a certain amount, and also proving and starting accident and unemployment insurance. So if you were to get hurt or if you were to lose your job, you were still going to get paid. And that is something that we still have in our country. If you lose your job, the government, our government, will pay you for a predetermined set of time. And the next slide showing improved education. You had an Education Act passed by Parliament, and a law created a system of schools, as well as in industrial cities like Manchester. So this is the end of the lesson. Please look at Google Classroom for this assignment that pertains to this lesson.